So as I let people gather and allow you to answer that poll question, I'll briefly introduce myself. I'm Brooke Roberts-Islam. I'm a writer and a author and consultant. I mostly write for Forbes and Business of Fashion, and I'm an author at Penguin. I also am the founder of the consultancy company TechStyler. Just a little bit of quick housekeeping before I introduce our excellent speakers today. The webinar will be recorded and it will be shared tomorrow. The discussion that I will moderate between Patrick and Jennie will last for 30 minutes, and then we'll have a 15-minute Q&A immediately after. Please use the Q&A button to ask any questions you have throughout the webinar. We'll be collating those, and I'll do my best to get through as many questions as possible. At the end of the webinar, you will also see the contact details of the respective companies. So if you have follow-up questions or you want to get in touch to explore any other details about the webinar or about the solutions, please just use those contact details as well. So we're a few minutes in. I think perhaps we can start with a brief introduction. I would love to welcome Jennie Peterson, who is the partner of New Focus Textiles, and Patrick Strumpf, who is the CEO of Haelixa, who will both be explaining how to prove recycled content in end materials. First of all, I think I'll give both Jennie and Patrick a minute to introduce themselves, their companies, and where they are at the moment in the world geographically. So maybe take it away for us, first of all, Jennie.
Thank you, Brooke. Happy to be here and happy to be talking about recycled cotton and traceability. So, New Focus Textiles is a woven fabric manufacturer. We have our operations based in China, Vietnam, and a little bit in Portugal as well. We mostly serve the US and the EU market, and also about 30% of our sales are for the local Asian market as well.
Mhm.
We actually produce a wide range of mostly cellulosic fibers from cotton and MMCF fibers and linens, and of course, recycled cotton. And we've actually been working with recycled cotton actively. I mean, I think our team has been working with recycled cotton for almost 20 years, but the the process has improved a lot, and we've invested a lot more in the past 5 years to really refine it to a point that recycled cotton can go into much more of our product range without just only on like very large yarns. And so it's come a long way in a short period of time. These past 5 years, we've been doing a lot more work with recycled cotton.
Super. And Patrick, tell us a little bit about yourself, Haelixa, and where you are at the moment.
Yes, hi everybody. My name is Patrick. I'm CEO of Haelixa. We are a Swiss-based company, deep tech company, and we have developed a solution to mark and trace raw materials with the use of DNA. And this raw material can be organic cotton, cashmere, or it can be also recycled material, which we are talking about today. We're based in Switzerland, as I said, but we have operations in India and Asia, and we're not only in the textile market, but also verifying mine provenance for gemstones, for example, and also for precious minerals. But our focus is textiles. And since the last, I would say, 6 to 12 months, we focused heavily on verifying recycled.
Perfect. Great. Thank you, Patrick. So before we jump into the sort of central topics of the webinar, I'm just going to give a couple of minutes overview of the state of play of traceability at the moment. Since this is the topic we're diving into today, and we'll be doing that from an operational point of view. So we'll be talking about how Jennie and Patrick and the teams at both Haelixa and New Focus Textiles have implemented physical tracing in the supply chain. We'll just have a quick snapshot of where things are at in terms of traceability adoption. So traceability in the industry, as many of you, I'm sure, know, you're on this webinar because this is an important topic to you, has been gathering pace over recent years and is turning from something that's been niche to something that's necessary. But it's been digital traceability platforms that have seen the most adoption. So the likes of Trust Trace, Textile Genesis, Retraced, all partners of Haelixa, are seeing faster and broader adoption, particularly among brands and retailers. And those digital platforms have been chosen specifically because they centralize data, they support compliance, they integrate and scale very well across supply chains. And this is essential as legislation expands. So they're the default entry point for traceability adoption. Now, on the physical side, physical systems such as Oratane, Haelixa, Fibertrace, Taylor Lux, they're growing, but the adoption has been more targeted and it's been slower. So while the likes of, as I mentioned, Oratane, they use forensic science to verify origin, physical systems like Haelixa provide material level verification. That's the distinction. So physical tracing adoption has been strongest where the fraud risk is highest. So with organic cotton or cashmere, as Patrick's mentioned, and this verification has been combined with the digital systems I mentioned. So Helix's DNA traceability certificates, for example, are uploaded directly into the digital tracing platforms that many brands and retailers have already adopted to provide both physical proof as well as the digital record. Now, companies have said that they choose physical traces to provide the ground truth verification. So, where they really want to go beyond reported data, where there's a high risk, or where they've paid a premium for materials. To quickly just summarize the state of play today in 2026, I've leaned on a report that was published by Sourcing Journal last year called The Future of Fashion Traceability, Sustainability in Supply Chains in 2026. And what that report, which surveyed 450 fashion industry stakeholders across all of the different segments of the supply chain, revealed was that around 46% of fashion businesses have visibility to tier four, but only 44% are doing some sort of verification, which shows, and that could be just a digital reconciliation, by the way. That's not 44% doing physical verification. So it shows an over reliance on digital only systems. But what it also showed was that amongst those stakeholders, 56% plan to increase their traceability spend in the next 2 years, and 17 of those significantly. So, what does that mean? What's next? Well, today we're going to look at a use case that sort of bucks the trend of what's come before. So, where many of the physical adoption cases to date have been related to noble fibers or so-called premium fibers, this is an example of the use of physical tracing in recycled fibers in order to prove not just compliance and presence, but specific premium characteristics. So, with that said, I'm going to hand things over now to Jennie, first of all, to explain to us why they chose to start physical tracing at New Focus. So, Jennie, what's your why?
So thank you. So it's exactly as you mentioned. It's the physical tracer is basically a bridge between, the physical reality and the digital records that exist here in the supply chain. And I think it's important to have an understanding of the value added for the fibers that are within the supply chain as well. So that's the main reason that we implemented the Haelixa tracer is to see to be able to identify that our recycled fibers have been used throughout the supply chain. Since we are a tier four and a tier two manufacturer supplier, we actually own our own recycling facility with a partner, and so we have direct input into the feedstock that's going into the recycling system, how the machines have been run, or what type of fibers have been used in those machines before our feedstock is used. We can be very specific on all of the variables for the shredding and the recycling process. So that gives us a lot of control for that tier four level of fiber quality control.
Mhm.
Um, after these years of working with recycled fibers, and sometimes we would recycle our own, and sometimes we would buy, previously we would buy recycled fiber or recycled yarn from partners in the market. And we identified that there are different levels of quality. And so we wanted to, with our own facility and our own manufacturing, we wanted to differentiate that this is actually a higher level of quality of recycled cotton material. I think right now in the market, there's not a lot of um, there aren't a lot of classifications or specifications to identify, what grade or what quality you're buying for your recycled fibers in terms of your cellulosic fibers. And so, we wanted to impart a little bit of trust, an element of a branded aspect, the quality traceability is there. And
Mhm.
so you can really I guess, identify throughout the supply chain where it started, and then you can trace back through the supply chain as a method of understanding sort of your batch consistency, or the value that you're getting from a higher quality material.
Understood. And what we've been seeing on the screen as you've been explaining that is the process of integration. So we've seen on the screen already the shredding of the fabric, the spraying with the Haelixa installed sprayer, then the pre-baling process. Do you want to just give us a little bit of an overview of that, just sort of briefly as to how that was installed, and
Sure.
you did the tests?
It was actually pretty fast once we received the spray unit, and I think Patrick will elaborate later on this, but the actual liquid was formulated specifically for us. So once we received that, and the Haelixa team member actually flew up into China, and it was about a 1.5 day installation. And so basically, what we do is we shred the fabric, and the DNA, the physical tracer, is actually implemented after the shredding. And this is simply because of how, and it was within the same facility. It's just within the same large room, actually. And this is just because of how our machines were set up. And so the tracer was applied here on the fiber level after the shredding, and then it was mixed continuously, and then it was sent to our spinning partner. It was actually before, like in the spinning process, we actually blend it with U.S. cotton, with virgin cotton, and we do select a more premium level of cotton that provides more strength later. And then we use a special spinning method, a special spinning process that also gives it a higher consistency and uniformity. Um, After it's spun into yarns, it's sent back to our weaving facilities where we weave it, and then we proceed to do the dyeing and finishing and printing. We can do whether it's piece dye or yarn dye. And then the last step is we actually sent the yarns for testing, and we could send it. I think there are various labs that we can send it, but we actually sent it to the Haelixa laboratory directly, and we received the test report back in about a week,
Mhm.
showing the positive result to indicate that it had passed the forensic test, and that the tracer was evident in the yarns.
Perfect. Thank you. And Patrick, could you tell us a little bit about the DNA tracer? I mean, it's not a concept that most people are familiar with. So how is the tracer made? What makes it unique to this particular use case? And why is it indestructible?
Yes, yeah, thanks, Brooke. We have this great slide here with a nice Swiss mountain in the background, and that's something that is important for us because we get asked quite often, RDNA, does that affect somehow the quality? Is that harmful? And that was for us one of the major reasons why we use DNA. It's absolutely harmless. So it's derived from natural material. Actually, we use Swiss mountain herbs for that. And once that is the DNA is created for a customer, for New Focus, we created a specific DNA which only New Focus is using and will be able to verify. So this DNA then is encapsulated. And that encapsulation, and I don't want to be too technical, but that is important because in all the processing steps in textile, the DNA needs to survive. And that part of the encapsulation makes it survive bleaching, dyeing, washing, the fiber making. So we, in case of New Focus, we applied after or on the fiber, but we could have also applied it on the scraps, and it would have survived that. So that's the important part from the production side. Why do we use DNA? Oh, sorry, yeah.
No, please carry on. Please carry on.
I mean, since I see that slide here now, why do we use DNA on top? Is also because it's actually almost impossible to crack. I also said in the beginning we use it for precious minerals and metals, where the incentive to cheat is probably even higher than in textiles. But if you don't know the key to this, you will not find it. You cannot see the DNA because it's invisible. So the security level is super high and at the same time super versatile. So every brand gets its own DNA and will be able to verify its own DNA. You have to imagine this a bit like a barcode, a lot of numbers, and we can program these numbers with information. Can be a brand, can be a collection, can be a fiber. In terms of what Jennie said, they are mixing it with 70% US cotton. So we could, for example, also mark in the US cotton, and then we would have two DNAs in one fiber afterwards, or also in one garment.
And also considering what Jennie was describing, could you make different custom DNA markers according to how New Focus wants to use them? So on a particular quality of recycled fiber or a particular composition, could you do that also?
That's also possible, and the use cases are different from customer to customer. So in case of a manufacturer like New Focus, they want to verify, this is our fiber, and they want to avoid substitution or blending of the fiber. At the same time, it's kind of a branding, and I think Jennie, you named it like you want to have your quality assured by a forensic test or a forensic verifiable tool, and the DNA there is perfect for that. But at the same time, it can be also used to verify the origin. So where is this coming from? We have marked it there at New Focus, or we have marked cotton in this region, and it's not coming from that region. So this is also one of the beauties of DNA. It's very versatile. We can create literally thousands of different DNAs.
Yes. And in fact, just Jennie, we had spoken in advance of this webinar about how, in a sense, you're able to use your custom DNA tracer to brand your fibers. So perhaps we can have a look at the test results that you have attributed to those marked fibers to understand the added value that you're effectively branding by using the physical tracer. Maybe you can talk us through what you've been able to attribute to those fibers.
Right. So, so what I was mentioning before is just there aren't really a lot of standards within the industry for what type of recycled cotton or what type of recycled materials are being purchased, and sometimes the quality of those fibers and those yarns will dramatically affect the strength and performance of your finished product and your finished goods. And I would say, for years, the quality reputation of recycled cotton has been that it's an inferior product to virgin cotton. And in fact, it's true that virgin cotton is stronger than recycled cotton. However, if the yarn size, so all of the yarns that we tested here are on a 20 single yarn. So it's actually suitable for certain tops and a lot of bottoms. And it's only our recycled percentage is 30%. So here we've shown 3 different yarns that have been tested. One is our New Focus recycled cotton yarn that has, we actually tested it with the Haelixa tracer and without the Haelixa tracer, the same yarn from the same the same feedstock, the same quality control. And there was zero difference before and after the tracer was applied. So the tracer actually doesn't affect the performance at all. But just to say that our methodology of how we're recycling it, we wanted to have a market to show and prove our differentiation, and that there's an added value with the way that we're providing the fabrics and the fibers. So if you see in the green is our recycled cotton, and in the orange is sort of the industry general recycled cotton standard. It's not a huge difference, but it's enough that you can see a quality control differentiation. Both of them are less than virgin cotton, which is to be expected. But
Sure.
there's a spectrum of quality here, and that's the point, is that not all recycled cottons are made equally. And so there will be advantages within the market. You know, you can have you can prove the technical attributes and the benefits here. You can prove that the tracer is present. You can probably prove like a higher return on investment in terms of how well your machines will run efficiently with better yarns, how maybe you'll have fewer NEPs in your production, you'll have fewer quality control issues down the line. So you start with better feedstock, and ultimately you'll end with a higher grade of finished product material. And that's ultimately what we're hoping to show here.
Yes, and I presumably over time, as you are able to sort of build out this data, perhaps there are links to be made with durability, which then also is linked to some of the responsibilities that brands, you know, are now culpable for when it comes to EPR and those sorts of regulations. Um, Patrick, it would be great to hear a little bit from you about the sort of implementation side of things in terms of how long it takes, how frequently the PCR testing is done throughout the supply chain, and the details around that for anyone wondering, you know, how long does it take?
Yeah. Very good point. Maybe just one thing to mention on what Jennie said on the quality. I find that very interesting. And I mean, all of our customers are, of course, very interested in, okay, does that affect my quality? I mean, first question is, does it affect the customer who uses this? Or you want to have God certification and all of that. But then second question is, and how about the quality? And I think this is super important to mention. I mean, what we are actually spraying is 99% water. It's a liquid solution, and there's a very tiny little amount of DNA inside. And that's why the quality is also not affected. And that's also something we really engineered in a way, that almost, on every fiber we can use it without any quality affection. So that's important. And then how do we set it up? What you see here on this picture is you see this little tank, or this big tank actually. In this big tank, the new Focus team was filling these little bottles you see on the left-hand side. One of these small bottles, 100 milliliter, is enough to mark over 10 tons of material. So just to give you a relation of how much is needed. And then on the left-hand side, you see also like this control unit. And on the right-hand side, you see the sprayer. So we deliver the tank, the control unit, and the sprayer, which is basic technology, in my view, which is needed so people on site can also repair if something breaks down. At Jennie, I hope everything is still fine. I think I didn't hear anything, so it's working. But we had cases.
Good.
Okay, very good. But we had cases, when something broke down, and then things need to be replaced easily, and not, from us in Switzerland doing something. So very basic technology around the DNA technology. And from the setup, once that is set up, we mark a certain amount. We check if we find the DNA, and if we find it in the right concentration. And once that is done, then the marking can start. And for us, what we do usually is in the beginning, we would test a bit more to be sure, okay, this is included. And also maybe on the further steps in the supply chain, so that no blending or substitution is happening. What we have seen is, and we changed that also in our project management, we now usually inform the supply chain upfront. We tell them, okay, this material is now marked with DNA. It will be traceable until the finished garment. We will find if the DNA is inside or if the material has been blended. and that already decreases fraud rate by over 50%. But when we find something, then we would point that out.
Sure. Okay. And so, in terms of the whole process there, it looks like 3 to 4 months for installation and first phase of testing, and then it's really up to the stakeholder who's working with you to decide how often they test and where they test.
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, it took us roughly 3 months, I think, from the, or 4 months from the start of talking to New Focus, finding out, okay, what is their issue? What do they want to use the DNA for? Where do they want to install? Then the setting up, as Jennie said, was 1.5 days. Then we did some test runs, and now it's running. So, but I would say, yeah, these projects usually take 3 months. And then from the testing side, ballpark, we test every 60 or 30 to 60 tons. Depends on how much the customer wants that. And as I said, in general, we could only test the finished garment and say, okay, we find the DNA, but that's probably too late when the products are, already in Europe, for example.
Sure.
You want to find that out before.
Absolutely. And so what do the test results look like? I mean, what do you upload into the
Mhm.
digital tracing platforms?
Yeah, it's the certificate of analysis which we issue. We look for the DNA. We give confidence of 99.9%, saying yes, we found the DNA, and in this blend grade, which we have defined before. So because usually it's not like when you have a branded fiber like the one from New Focus, it's not like you're not getting that at all. Mostly it is blended with other fibers which you don't want in there. So we would be able to see that. And then we would upload this certificate into a digital traceability tool. And there, especially us, we are integrated into Textile Genesis and TrustTrace, but we also work with Retraced, and we can upload it actually into any tool. But these two, we are quite well interconnected.
Hmm. And so presumably though, for this, so I know that in this particular case, you've done the tests in partnership with New Focus Textiles, but it's also possible for other labs to do the tests. But I guess in order to do that, they need the DNA. So how does
Yeah. That's a very good question. We get asked that a lot of times.
that?
So we are not interested in doing all this testing. And also our customers most of the time say, hey, can we also test ourselves? So they could, in theory, they can, work with any third-party lab. In terms of regulation, like the verification should be a third-party forensic test. So
Mhm.
when we share the DNA sequence with another lab, if the customer allows us, then this can be read out in any lab that can do a PCR. And I would say that is 95% of all the textile labs have a PCR machine.
Yeah. And so you send a sample of the DNA related to that client, and then that DNA, so the sample is swabbed, and then the DNA is either matched or not.
Yes. So
Okay.
what we do is, good point. So how do we find that out? We take a swab. You remember that from COVID, what you put into your
Yeah.
nose. It's the DNA related swab. You take that swab, you put that into a buffer liquid, and then you can run this PCR. And
Okay.
that's also important, especially when you have high value material. I mean, if we get a nice cashmere sweater from a luxury brand, you don't want to cut out something, and put it into a tube. So
Mm.
these guys, they want their sweaters back. So then you can do it with a swab test. That's
Ah,
also,
perfect. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, interesting. And then presumably you have APIs with the digital platforms that sort of seamlessly integrate. Is that right? And for uploading?
Not to all of them. We have it to Textile Genesis and TrustRace, but to the other ones, we would send this certificate, and we can, I mean, very quickly integrate into them because they
Okay.
know. I mean, for us, we don't see us as competitors to digital solutions, and they don't see us as that. They
No.
tell us, our data is only as good as the initial part, and if the initial very physical verification is not there, the data is not really good enough. They know that. That's why they
Mm.
also like to partner with us.
Sure. Jennie, now that we've heard the process and the implementation duration and the way that it's been managed, what were your concerns about all of this? At the beginning, I guess you couldn't have known quite how long it would take and how it would go. So, what were your worries?
I mean, I think cost comes to mind. Of course, you worry how much is this going to cost and how is this going to slow down manufacturing. Um, and you also you we had a hope that it was going to prepare us for upcoming compliance and maybe regulatory challenges or incoming changes that we might face coming down the line from European markets. Maybe needing to show and prove recycled cotton content, needing to show origin verification. It was, plus also the quality control. It was like very important for us to show that we have a good hold on the quality control for our recycled cotton. But yeah, I would say that our initial concern is, will this add any extra time to the manufacturing lead time? That's probably the top concern a lot of customers have is the timing and the cost. And so I would say that you know, we only had to stop production for one day for the sprayer installation, and then when the fibers was sent to when the fibers were sent to the spinner, they also needed to stop production for that production line, in order to make sure that we didn't have foreign substances and that it was one uniform, our only material was the one flowing through that line. So we did have to have a minimum amount to be used within the spinner. But it was always very manageable and it really didn't slow anything down. And so, the timing and the cost weren't really a factor long term.
Hmm. And Patrick, tell us the burning question. How much does it cost? Give us some ballpark figures for this kind of implementation.
Yeah, the cost is something, and you mentioned that in the beginning. I took a note on that. 56 plan to increase their costs,
Yeah.
17% plan to increase significantly. I wasn't aware of these numbers, but the
Mm,
cost is something, yeah, we always get challenged. And we are now on the market for 10 years, and we brought the cost down significantly. So now, ballpark, I mean, to start a project with us, you have to invest probably $20,000. That's
mhm,
what a pilot project is costing. And then
mhm,
if you want to calculate that, on the fiber or on the final garment level, that depends, of course, on quantities, but you can calculate between 1 to 2 cents per garment. That's
mm.
how we roughly calculate this.
Okay. And in terms of the testing, how much does that cost?
Testing is actually in every lab more or less the same cost. Wherever you go, it's between $140 and $160, $180 maybe, depending on the lab. But this is way less expensive than competitors, which usually charge, I mean, over 1,000. Especially
Right.
the isotope testing is way more expensive. And this
Yeah.
is also like, depending on the risk level the customer wants to take. So for us, once the fiber is marked, you can verify at any point always. If you get challenged by someone, if someone says, I don't believe this is recycled cotton in your garment, you will be able to show that. But you would probably, once you are sure that your supply chain is not cheating on you, then you would probably go down with the test at a minimal level. And then it's €160 per test, or
Yeah.
$160.
Got it. Okay. Sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
Um, okay, well, that takes us to the sort of the main chunk of the webinar, I guess. Team behind the scenes, Bruna and Alex. You could let us know if you've collated the results from the initial icebreaker question, and perhaps you can pop those on the screen for us. Okay, here we go. So, around half of the people joining the webinar rely on supplier declarations when it comes to recycled content claims. So uh, that's interesting. I think that's probably representative of what we would have assumed, and I'm guessing that's probably the certifications coming through from suppliers along the lines of GOTS or RCS. So interesting. And 4% not doing any verification, so not asking for certificates. Another quarter do physical. Okay, so there's quite a lot of that's interesting to see. There's quite a lot of people who have already adopted physical traceability who have joined the call. So I will go now to the Q&A and have a little look at what questions we've got here. Okay, so first question. I work in certification for textile supply chains, and I'm curious about the DPP angle. Is the tracer already aligned with DPP requirements, or is that part of the roadmap to 2027? Maybe Patrick, since you're based in Europe at this moment in time, and I know that your team have been tracking what's demanded of EU regulation, do you have any comment to make on that as to whether your data is going to be compliant with the data verification, with the verification databases that will feed into DPP?
Yes, we get asked this quite a lot, and regulations are changing, unfortunately, all the time. So it's not 100% clear. But what I can say is that for material sourcing and recyclability attributes, so this data needs to be collected for a digital product passport. And with a solution like Haelixa, you would be able to collect and verify the data. So for this, I think it's we are supporting the DPP. And especially in recycling, that is something where we see great potential. Yeah.
So it's a case of preparing for it and waiting for what's demanded and in what form.
I mean, we do this physical trace. I mean, the providing physical evidence is something that DPP is asking for, and that is something that we deliver.
Mm. And is it possible to detect the percentage of blending is another question. And what's the latitude there?
Yeah. Also, very good question. That's something that is needed and that we can verify, not on a 0.1 percentage basis, but in steps of 10. So we can see, is there 100% of the DNA still available, or is it 80%, 70, 60, 50, and then going down in steps of 10?
Okay. We've had a question about the competitiveness of Haelixa in terms of pricing, but I think you've addressed that quite well, Patrick. Another question here about, is the next major challenge to improve the technology or to improve the comprehension of it? You know, what needs to happen now? Maybe this is something that you might be able to weigh in on, Jennie, considering you're hoping that your brand and retail clients are going to take an interest in the fact that you've adopted this to prove premium quality of your recycled materials.
Right. I mean, we hope that the demand for recycled content materials will grow within the fashion industry. It goes up and down. There are different trends for people adopting recycled cotton. And right now the demand is not incredibly strong. I think that comes from the price is a little bit higher. But in terms of the technology, I think the technology for the blending and I mean not the blending, but I think the technology for the spinning is improving, and it depends on where you are. In China, I think the spinners are excellent. Pakistan is also very strong, from my understanding. I think in terms of the technology for the information flowing through the supply chain, it's for sure just growing at lightning speed in terms of how, you're not only putting into the computer system, and it's only a matter of time between now and a few years from now where everything within the computer system is going to be monitored very closely, how the information actually flows through the supply chain. And as we become better at tracing and tracking the operations and the material flows, the technology for how that connects with the brand systems and the systems within the supply chain are definitely only going to get better. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I think definitely. And of course, we can expand offline as well where people have more specific questions. We had a question in from a spinner in Bangladesh, Asraful Islam, asking about implementation and about whether or not the marker could be used at the source of waste collection. Could you talk to us a little bit more about that, either Jennie or Patrick, to tell us about the flexibility of when the marker is applied and the consequences of that?
I think
Yeah.
Patrick implemented this before in such a way.
Yes. So we did implement also at the source of collection. So that's also one of the advantages of the DNA. So we can also apply it on waste, and then it gets shredded, it gets spun to new fiber, and we will still detect the DNA. This is another use case. So let's say H&M, they're collecting, jeans, have a collection point, everything is going through a conveyor belt, and then we can spray on that post-consumer waste, or in case of Jennie, post-industrial waste. Both can be marked, and once it is marked, it runs through the whole process and it will be detected.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
In this way, a brand would be able to prove that they have completed a full loop circular or
Yes.
recovery system, right? I mean, to show that you've recovered the materials that are already within your supply chain could be a very strong story.
Or perhaps even geographically, in terms of waste management within a certain geographic region or country
Absolutely.
even. And a question from Sherry about synthetics. Could this tracing be applied to synthetics in the future, or to verify, again, a question about post-consumer in polyester production?
Yes, actually, there's, I would say, we see a lot of demand, maybe also because of war, prices are increasing. So probably suddenly recycling in that part becomes more attractive. We are partnering with the 3 biggest recyclers already and testing, but we have not rolled that out on a commercial level. But yes, it's possible. We would mark after the fiber is spun on the fiber. It's a bit different model than what we have seen, but we managed to find a way to attach it to the fiber because it's not water-based and it's an oil-based solution, but that's working. Yeah.
Okay. Another question, can a brand work directly with Haelixa?
Sorry?
There's another question here. Can brands work directly with Haelixa? Because of course we've presented a supply chain, mill example here.
Yeah. I mean, we focused in the past on manufacturers, then we went to brands, and then we went back to manufacturers. At the end, I mean, we have a very good board member from Puma and Anlo, and she always says, the work is done with the manufacturers. They have to do it at the end. And I think that's why we also really put a lot of effort in enabling manufacturers because they have to do it. But the brand, usually they come to us and say, I want this, but then the implementation is with the manufacturers. But yes, we do work with brands, but mostly implementations are done from the manufacturer side.
Great. And there's one last question that's popped up, and that's about communication of finished products from a brand perspective. Is there an angle here for communicating with the end customer about this? That could come from both of you, actually. It'd be nice to have both of your comments, and we're in the last minute, so
Yeah.
fire.
I think this would be a story for the brand to show and be able to link back through either their DPP or on their website or their customer facing marketing, and to be able to show, for example, test reports, or to be able to show the origin. If they could have a QR code that could immediately scan back to where the origin came from, if it were a full loop recovery and recycling system. Or I think it would be up to the brand how they wanted to tell that story, but I think there are a lot of options for that.
Sure.
Yeah, how I see it talking to the brands, the biggest part what they can lose is trust to customers. And the trust is usually between brand and customer, not between customer and manufacturer. So the customer expects that the brand does everything right in the supply chain to satisfy the customer. But all these risks, greenwashing accusation, recalls, legal, accusations, all of that is, of course, on the brand. So they need to make sure that everything works nicely. And once they do that, they still are a bit afraid of communicating because there might be still something that is not 100%. And then they get accused for that, which is a pity, because I feel a lot of brands are really doing a very good job. But we hear that so often. Of course, we would be interested in communicating more about the brands we are working with, but they say, we are careful. We don't know if we should communicate this, because if something is not 150%, we get, kicked hard. Yeah.
I think that's where the compliance and legal teams are still trying to navigate green claims and other regulations as they evolve. So hopefully that's something that will be addressed as regulation becomes clear and it's in a high level of implementation. Sadly, we're out of time. It's been a fantastic discussion. Thank you so much, Patrick and Jennie and Bruna and Alex behind the scenes, running the poll and also the presentation slides. I think finally, just to say that if you want to get in contact with the teams, I hope, yes, there we go. We've got the QR code. So if you want to get in touch with either of the teams or both of the teams, please use the QR codes there. And we hope that you've enjoyed the session and that it's been useful for you. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Brooke. Thank you,
Thank you, Brooke,
Patrick.
for preparing this. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.